welcome to our panel discussion on the future of science, technology, engineering, and medicine, STEM in India, organized by uMaster. uMaster is a global platform to prepare STEM enthusiasts who are in the age group of 13 years to 25 to master successful careers as research scientists, doctors, entrepreneurs, and innovators. My name is Ashwarya Prabhu, and I will be your host for the evening. We wanted to host a discussion on STEM in India, and we were trying to figure out what day to pick. What better time and occasion to celebrate the National Science Day? Okay, let me take you and give you a little bit of history on how National Science Day came about. It signifies the day when the Raman effect was discovered by the Nobel laureate Sir C.V. Raman in actually 1928. But in 1986, the National Council for Our Nation and Technology Communication asked the Government of India to designate Feb 28th as National Science Day. And ever since 1987, 28th of February, every year in India is celebrated as National Science Day. And this year's theme for National Science Day is empowering Indian youth for global leadership in science and innovation for 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Bharat. And we strongly believe for India to be a global leader for 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Bharat, the future of STEM education will be a key determinant. To give us more insights on this, we've brought together three diverse experts. Today, they will share with us their opinions, thoughts on how students and parents can make effective decisions and use of all the amazing resources available in India. So let's introduce who our guests are, our experts are for the day. I'll start with Dr. Palak Bhandari. Entrepreneurship is often described as a puzzle, and Dr. Palak is someone who jumped into solving it really early on. A dentist by training and an educator at heart, she ventured into entrepreneurship while still in college, driven by her passion for making learning more engaging for medical and dental students. Over the past 2 years, her journey has been anything but a straight line, filled with unexpected turns, long hours, and moments of uncertainty, but also breakthroughs, forming teams and witnessing ideas turn into reality. As the founder of MediStudyGo, she has been exploring how education and technology can come together to transform the way students retain complex information. Through all the ups and downs, one thing has remained constant: her excitement to navigate this ever-evolving journey. Today, she joins us to share her experiences, insights, and the lessons she's learned along the way. Welcome, Dr. Palak. Next up, we have Dr. Jaru Manoj Manual, a distinguished biomedical scientist and educator with over 15 years of experience across academia, industry, and scientific outreach globally. His academic journey includes a master's in biomedical genetics from Vellore Institute of Technology, a PhD in cancer genetics from National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, famously known as NIMHANS, India, and an RNA Innovation Postdoctoral Fellowship in Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. He is a winner of the prestigious 2023 Xiaomi Shen Award for Scientific Excellence in Stem Cell Biology, Top 25 globally at Boston, USA. He was also nominated for 2025 Emerging Scientist by Indian Society of Human Genetics in the top 5. As a founder of uMaster, Dr. Manual is committed to changing the landscape of STEM education in India, with emphasis on scientifically training a practical focused workforce with a hands-on approach for the STEM students. Thank you, Dr. Jaru, for joining us today to share your thoughts. Finally, we have Mr. Prashant Nori, who leads research at Quizzes. In the past, he has worked across entrepreneurship, large-scale education, edtech, and nonprofits, focused on scaling high-quality education using innovative learning technologies. He has been a researcher at MIT and Harvard. He's been awarded the Mumbai Heroes Award in 2017, the Harvard Innovative Ventures in Education Award for Highest Impact in 2022. His work has been covered widely in Harvard Ed Magazine, TEDx, and leading print media. Welcome, Prashant. Looking forward to hearing some amazing insights from you. Thank you, three panelists, our experts for the evening, to take time off and be a part of this evening. So let's start with our discussion. To begin with, I would love to request the three experts to quickly tell us a little bit about yourselves. What led you to STEM and why do you think STEM education is important? Can we begin with Dr. Palak?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I'm a dentist and I am a very passionate educator, really involved in teaching medical and dental students through their journey of medical education. What led me to STEM? I would say there is nothing that led me to STEM. Today's Indian parents are only thinking about how to put their students into a medical college, and a 18-year-old really does not have too many options, too many exams. So there's nothing like when you enter a college setup, it's really definitely not what you're thinking about, like STEM education. These are words that come to you only after you have actually studied and, gone through your education to realize that, okay, this was a STEM education. So that's what it is. And I think the third question that you asked was,
Why do you think STEM education is important?
oh, I think it's super important because nothing today, whether it is dental, medical, whatever education we are doing, nothing is standalone, right? There's a lot of integration in everything that we do. As an educator, I've seen that the entire medical education has shifted from being a single subject to now being all about integration, to being all about, talking about how can we collaborate between subjects, how can we think as if we are solving one single problem. So at the end of it, I think everything is about integration, and STEM education speaks totally about how we all come together and different parts of education come together to solve a real problem. So I think it's really important.
Thank you for sharing your bit about STEM education. Can we move on to Prashant, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ashcharya and Palak. I think very briefly about myself, I'm a teacher at heart. I work at quizzes on research, but most of my work is on working with teachers and trying to understand, how do we solve some of their toughest problems in the classroom. I've started my career teaching and all of that stuff, right? So traditionally, I don't think anyone looking at my career or my choices would call it STEM, but it's kind of ended up there because I think one of the big questions today is like, what is not STEM? Really, almost any field you work in, it doesn't matter, right? Like you could be, working as a, social worker, you could be working, in philanthropy, but like a lot of life has become intertwined with like elements of technology, science, engineering, medicine, and in fact, in the larger edtech education lingo, we call it STEAM now because of the addition of arts into it. And so I think that it's important because it's ubiquitous. It's hard to imagine a world or life where you are not either impacted or impacting STEM or STEAM in some manner. And what led me here is, in fact, I think a constant question. I'm guessing a lot of the audience are 13 to 15, 13 to 18-year-olds. And if you had asked me when I was 13, what led me there, I have no idea, right? Like, I think a lot of the ecosystem around grew up in a science family, things like that just encourage you to head in that direction. Bangalore's a famous military academic industrial complex. So some of those lead to just being surrounded by science and a lot of institutions like ISC and ISRO and so on, and MHANS and all of that, right? So I think I would say a series of fortunate and unfortunate accidents led me to STEM into the career I'm in right now. But yeah, it's important because as I said, I think the big question is what is not STEM today or what is not STEAM today. So yeah.
Thank you. I think two common threads is it's everywhere and there's no way you can escape it. So Dr. Jeru, what are your thoughts on this?
So for me, actually, the path was not really STEM or anything as such. I decided I just wanted to be a geneticist because I saw a lot of people with genetic disorders when I was in my teenage. I had the question of why they are maybe different from others. Personally, too, in an extended family, there was somebody who was there. That's when I kind of wanted to be a geneticist. But as I went into it and did my bachelor's, master's, and on, I realized that genetics is the core of every life form, and for humans too, it's the same. And I wanted to understand how do we apply genetic medicine to kind of come up with disorders for complex disorders. So that was my thought process of how I entered into STEM. With respect to the STEM needs, yes, STEM is definitely going to be a huge need. And India is just entering the STEM phase. There are no deep science or deep tech companies that have come out from largely from India. Like even the Nobel Prize, right? After C.V. Raman, which is almost 95 years since he won the Nobel Prize, no one's really won the Nobel Prize doing the research in India. So it's just the beginning. India is at that phase. We cannot complain about what happened in the past. We did not have the resources. But right now we have that. And I feel STEM is going to be shape India towards like the government's dream of Viksit Bharat 2047.
Thank you, Dr. Jaru. I think you brought out a very important factor that it's a lot is happening in India, especially now. And there's a lot of scope. There's a lot that we can gear up towards. That brings me to my next question, especially to Prashant, because you have worked closely with curriculum experts, with education experts, and the large-scale implementation of it, right? So in the next 10 to 20 years, what do you think will be the big shift in STEM education, primarily in Indian space?
Yeah, great question. I think today there's I don't know, there's one thing of like what has already shifted, right? So in the last maybe 2-3 years, what has already shifted is uh, knowledge, language has become very sort of omnipresent. Everyone has access to a lot of these tools. They're able to simplify it to your level, so you can engage, learn if you're keen on. There's a lot that you can sort of do. So if you looked at, what it was like maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or 20 years ago when Wikipedia, Coursera, these kind of things were coming up, it was a lot of like, there's a dissonance between the knowledge that exists and people's access to it, and we'll solve some of those connectors and fix that dissonance. But today, I would argue that some of all those efforts have paid off, right? And a lot of it is accessible in your language in the way that you want to access it. And I think the next big question happens is like, now that you have access to it, what do you do with it? These are questions that other countries have been working on for the last 10-20 years. And like Dr. Cheru was saying that we're now at that cusp where we have the demographic dividend on our side, so many youth, tens of millions of them coming out, and the tools exist, the access to knowledge exists, and now the real question is what can you do with it, and both good and bad, right? So I think that in STEM education, there will be a lot of focus on what good you can do with it. And by that, I mean, what are some, we love solving a lot of problems, but we don't know what problems to solve. So a lot of conversation will shift to like, how do you identify what problems to solve? And that's going to be like one big chunk of how STEM education will shift. How do you find the right problem to solve? Instead of just saying, how do I get access to information so I can solve problems? And I think the second layer is, you can do a lot of harm. You can spread a lot of misinformation. You can, cause a lot of bigotry and hatred. And so I think this next big question is how do you mitigate sort of bad things from happening? And how do you keep an eye out for what bad actors may be out there, and how do you build, safer, more ethical systems around it? So I think that a lot of education focus will move on to one, like I said, onto like utility tools, finding the right problem solving, and two onto like ethics and, and some of that, yeah.
Thank you. I think COVID was a huge factor for accessibility to ensure that it reached out to all. But now the good and the bad, and how do you just ensure that bifurcation is happening is really key. Would Dr. Palak or Dr. Jaru want to add on to any of these, anything that Prashant has shared?
I see another trend of because now there's a lot of access to information, which was not the case, at least when I was a student. We had to go through this traditional methods, but now they have more access to information. The STEM education or the careers will kind of move more towards practicality. Like I did attend a meeting a couple of months ago in Delhi, where they were talks about having industry come into the universities and train students specifically for industrial needs. I think that could probably be a very big change by 2030 or 2035, which I kind of see. Globally, that change has started to happen a bit. In India, I think we'll have that in 5-6 years. So then maybe the education time spent in a university will reduce, and time spent practically solving some issues may increase.
Yeah, I think NEP is also driving that towards it. Dr. Palak, would you have anything to share?
Yeah, so I feel both of the education, the way students are consuming information, as well as how it's going to be tested, will have a huge change because there is like today it's all about, rote learning, writing an IIT exam, getting everything scored on marks, right? That's exactly what parents and students were thought of. But today it's not going to be like that very soon because um it's eventually going to be all about how much you can apply because all these mundane tasks, everything that was all memory based, can now all be replaced by AI. So the entire system of how a student consumes information and how a student is going to apply it and how he's going to be tested will be completely changed.
Yeah, testing methodologies and with the way content is being consumed, it's accessible, but how are you consuming it? What is the format is a crucial part. So thank you, the three of you, and especially Prashant, for shedding some lights on it. Dr. Palak, you mentioned that you have been working closely with students, and especially when parents are pushing them towards the medical field. And with marks and the way that format is also changing, you work with them on a daily basis on Study Go. What are their thoughts about STEM? And what aspirations do they have with respect to their future and the job that they want to get into? So what is running in the minds of these students?
So let's talk about parents. I think, at least in India, there's still a very clear drive that, it's a very exam-oriented setup. They still want their students to be. So a doctor getting into entrepreneurship is not something that's normal, right? And parents have not yet accepted that there is anything beyond treating a patient that a doctor is supposed to do. But eventually, such things are going to change because, again, AI is going to replace a lot of it. Just to give you an example, today we don't have to really diagnose patients like open your mouth, do this. No, there is already AI that is coming in, doing the basic, then sending you the patient. And then there's a very little thing that, as a doctor, you need to do. And imagine the shift that's going to come in the next 5-10 years. So I feel the students today and the parents today will overall start accepting this. I think we are still in the phase that are we sure that this is going to happen? So I think we are in that phase where that acceptance is left. And eventually, I think once they start seeing it, there will be a lot more change towards, okay, what different can you do rather than what um, your parents have been saying for the last 20-25 years. And especially the generation where in medical education books have not changed for the last 20 years, this change is going to be quite slow, but I'm pretty sure much faster than the evolution of books.
Thank you. I think that also brings close to the point of how Study Go is trying to even consume content, especially with the fact that students are looking at bite-sized content, trying to consume it as quick as possible, as visually as possible, and knowing that textbooks haven't changed across so many years. But still, I'm curious as to what is going on really in their head. You would have spoken to some of them, and what are they thinking about? This is with parents and education and medical field, but generally, what is their day-to-day thought process looking like?
I feel today they are yet in the stage of denial that anything can even happen. But
Right.
eventually the acceptance will come. I mean, they're thinking whether this is real. Today, if you look at in this space, people will be like, no, all this information is inaccurate and stuff like that. But eventually they'll realize that there's a lot more importance on diagnosing. So like today, if medical education is taking 5 years and 5 + 3 + 3, eventually it can be like really cut short, focusing only on what's really needed rather than a lot of extra things. So if you look at an intern doctor today in any medical institution, they are basically just interning their senior residents and stuff like that, basically just drawing out blood. But that's not something that eventually people will be doing after 5 years or 8 years of studying hard. They will actually be able to apply what they have studied, because now they have been given that time, right? Earlier it was all about memorization, but now they'll get to apply. And this, the change of, let's not focus on marks to let's focus on actually solving the problem, which is the patient, will start coming in.
Thank you for sharing that anecdote. I think that gives us perspective, and also it'll help students who are on the call and will be listening in later on to really understand what's going on in reality, right? From the traditional methodologies right now. Would Prashant or Dr. Jeru want to add on, because you both have also been working and are continuing to work with students at this point? What's going on in their curious minds, especially with future of STEM, their job, and just their aspirations?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very optimistic. I feel like there's conversation has changed. A lot of parents do panic that, oh, my kid is talking about blockchain. They're talking about, investing in cryptocurrencies. They're talking about, I have an account on Zerodha and I trade with my friends. And so the conversation shifted a little bit from what, say, we grew up in, right? So I think that I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as like a good thing that students are exploring what exists today and trying to push the boundaries of it. And the younger you are, the more playful your mind is, the more you're expanding and trying to see how far is too far and where you can go and those kind of questions. So I think definitely the big there's a lot of uncertainty. There's like, oh, I know AI can do a lot of things, and on the teacher's end, it's like if they cheat on the exams, then what's the point of the exams? And there's that level of conversation. But and say on the student's end, it's more like I have all of these cool tools in front of me, I can try. And I'm aspiring big. Like some of them, you hear kids wanting to start companies and MBA programs today encouraging more like entrepreneurship and things like that. And on one end, on the parents' end, it's like, I don't know how to cope with this. So much has changed in 5 years, right? So I think really the need of the hour is guidance, is some kind of handholding in this whole process for everyone, like educators, parents, students. And you can't figure it out like just online and do that. Some can, but the majority would need assistance from folks like Palak and Jeru. So I think that bit I'm very optimistic and excited about.
I'd like to add here, the next thing that they're saying today is that, in the next 2-3 years, the best business in the education space is to train people on what's coming in, or just to share the knowledge of what's coming in, because there is no acceptance. So it's going to be the best businesses if you want to do it for a short period.
And I think a lot of unlearning also, right? For parents who are so used to a particular way of learning or listening to things, and now moving into, like Prashant and you rightly pointed out, they're hearing new things and they're like, what is this? I've personally heard my brother say, and I'm like, yes, you need some unlearning to go in this space. And I think that's where I think, Dr. Jeru, you've been working with parents as well before they come on board to uMaster. What are your thoughts on this? And how do you balance the parents plus the students, what the students really want to go at, and parents' understanding of it?
So I think adding on to what both said, like both were right in that way. I also spoke to a lot of parents and students, like you said. What I felt is the students are quite ambitious now because they see that they have access to a lot more things than what was existing before. At the same time, there is also caution in terms of how do you enrich that ambition, right? Like the ecosystem, there's a lot of things that are being, but it's not, for me, I felt there has to be a lot more cohesion between all ecosystems to create that ambitious space for students. And with respect to the parents have kind of become aware about the change, especially I think after COVID, the change happened. Before that, I did not see, because COVID really impacted everybody on this planet. And they kind of started to get to think or see new things, like even in terms of content, right? You got access to more global content, and that kind of got about a change. But the factor which I felt in terms of parents, the parents wanted more stability. But the thing is, like you already pointed out, now the point of stability is completely changed. You have to only keep evolving, and that's the only stable thing. Like earlier, when you do a bachelor's or master's, you are set for life for 30, 40 years, you can work. But now, even if you have the most advanced expertise, you have to keep changing every 3 to 5 years. So that's going to be the stability, which I think it'll take some more time for parents to understand. But the overall ecosystem is moving forward, except for like having more cohesion, which I feel needs to come into the picture.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your insights, and especially Dr. Palak, to give us more about how you have experienced the medical space. I'll move on to Dr. Jeru actually. For these shifts to happen, right? And you have been in the space of R&D for the last 15 years. What role do you think R&D is playing currently in creating jobs and fostering this innovation aspect as such?
So R&D is a very critical component, but it's kind of not very well understood. That was the reason why I actually started uMaster too. People think R&D is just being in a lab or being in a big industry doing work. Every kind of a project in STEM, at least when people go on to work, requires some amount of R&D. So the importance of R&D is very, very huge. And people, when they learn about the process of R&D, what happens is people start to think more independent and start to think more creative in terms of solving the issues that are there in the ecosystem or in their surrounding large ecosystems. That is the big shift which R&D can kind of do, because right now we always look up for someone else to kind of come and solve the issues. We take the R&D methodology of what the West or China or whatever local countries do. But I feel personally, to solve the issues in India, we need to apply our own way of applying that R&D, understand that, and then try to work towards that. So I think that is the biggest importance I see, because as cities are going to grow, definitely the problems will increase in terms of civic sense, traffic, and every sort of problems can increase. With STEM growth comes also a lot of growth in terms of the other things, challenges to be addressed. So practical R&D mindset is very essential to address those things.
Thank you, Dr. Jeru. I think from actually getting somebody else to solve it and independently solve it, and that's what Viksit Bharat is also all about, right? With entrepreneurship getting focused. Actually, before that, does Dr. Palak or Prashant want to add on to anything that Dr. Jeru said? And then we'll move on to the next question, which I'm very curious about.
Nothing from my side.
Yeah, I've grown up around a lot of like scientists and R&D, and that's sort of been the world around, right? So I just want to give like a very quick example of, for example, the first time I probably like sat in an EV was when I was maybe 25 years ago. And on campus, when students at ISC and professors and my dad and a bunch of people were working on that stuff, and imagine that you're seeing the impacts of that on like a lot of those original students went on to work at Tata Motors. A lot of that went into battery tech, into like electric vehicles. So if you sat in any kind of an EV of a Tata vehicle today, it was because someone did some of this work at ISC like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, right? So we forget like how large the impact on society is, and how it shifts the needle, and how much time it takes to make meaningful shifts, right? So I think that like you wouldn't have any jobs in EV, and you wouldn't have any of that had like this foundational work not happened 30 years ago. And many scientists around the world working on it and building it. And then over time, business cases find themselves into being profitable, into industry maturing and actually accepting it, consumers accepting it. But I feel like sort of adding on that, like jobs will only be created if there's R&D. Like I don't think you can have a world where research is not happening and jobs are being created magically on the other end, right? So I think it's almost like they are one and the same.
Thank you, Prashant. It was really interesting to hear you say you've sat on those EVs even before any of us even have known about it. So to actually see its impact to see that cycle come through. And you spoke of R&D not being there and workforce not being there. That brings me to the next question, which I have for all three of you, in fact. What specific skills do students need to acquire to meet the demands of the future workforce in STEM? And I would also add on in STEAM as well, if you could think from that perspective, the skills that they need actually to acquire to meet the demands of the future workforce. And there's so much going on. How can they equip themselves? And this time, I think we'll start with Dr. Jeru.
I personally think keeping very fluid is the most important skill you'll have to develop right now, because there's no one fixed rule like before. Most of I think Dr. Palak spoke about this in our when she first introduced, about how everything is integrated and interlinked. So I think that's the most important skill set. And another one which I mentioned in my previous is learn to be very practical. Forget the theoretical aspects. There's enough information out there which is not going to get erased. You're not working to learn the theory and right. That's not going to be there for a long time. Rather think of how will you apply that theory to build something out. And that is a very important need, especially here with India. I think having almost at any given point in time 1.2 crore STEM-based students, and it's only going to increase by at least 10% in the next 6 years. So all of these people, if they have to be employed, they have to think of how to gain self-employment and entrepreneurship. And for that, they'll have to learn how to be independent and gain practical ability.
Thank you, Dr. Jeru. We'll move on to Prashant.
Yeah, this question is very close to my heart, my work, people I'm surrounded by. So I have there's a really lovely quote from 94 interview they did of Steve Jobs, and it basically goes saying that when you grow up, you tend to be told that the world is the way it is, and that your life is just to live your life inside the world. And that's in fact a very limited life. Life is much broader once you discover a very simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, you can build your own things that other people can use. The minute that you understand that when you poke life, if you push it in on one side, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing. So I feel like for me, ever since I've kind of come across this, I feel that's the skill that's needed. Knowing that you can mold the world around you, that you are in control. I know a lot of people believe in destiny and that greater powers are controlling your life, all of that. I get it. Not disputing any of those things. But I feel like knowing that you are in charge. Like a lot of things you can decide, you can shape, you can act in. Like Jeru was saying, you have to be fluid, you have to adapt, you have to think with a certain mindset, and all the other skills will flow from that. But I feel like just knowing that you can have an influence and an impact on the world around you is possibly the single most sort of important skill for students to imbibe.
Thank you, Prashant. Dr. Palak?
Yeah. So apart from everything that we've discussed, I think one very underrated skill is great communication and leadership, because all these tasks and skills are going to be replaced soon. But eventually we are actually going to interact with humans, right? So in the phase of technology and so much development, I feel the most underrated skill is your soft skill. So, the better we are as communicators, the better we are as leaders, is when we will really be able to have any impact.
Thank you, Dr. Palak. So for students, I hope you've made note of it. I'm going to recap what they said. They've said fluidity, actually being independent and practically working on things rather than theoretical knowledge, and the amazing quote that Prashant shared. But in that also, the fact that you are in control and you are the one who can determine anything that's happening around you. And finally, the soft skills that Dr. Palak shared, especially the great leadership and communication skills. I think, rightly put, if it's a good mix to be prepared for what's coming at you, what's being thrown at you. Thank you, three of you, for sharing your insights on this. Dr. Palak, you actually spoke of how parents' mindset, especially at this point, is sending them to medicine and then trying to even cope up with what's happening, trying to be in denial. Just moving into the fact that when they're making that decision, right now, students, a lot of them are making that decision for themselves, but there are still a majority where parents are involved in that decision making, right? So how should Indian parents think, learn, and actually make decisions about STEM for the students at this point?
That's a great question. So I think, as you rightly said, that a parent's influences a lot, especially when you are, really young. So I feel, first of all, educating the parents about what is going to come is super important. And the parents have to shift their mindset from just allowing the student to focus on that degree, because now everybody is just thinking about, oh, do you have this degree, versus people thinking about how you can have certain skills and then eventually, solve a problem. So I think parents need to shift their focus from exams and degrees to actually now being able to see whether their student is really able to solve that problem hands on, and focus on very basic skills, right? So if you see, today, the importance of very basic things is much more than what it was earlier, right? The focus is not even on knowledge now. So parents need to just focus on basic skills, like a overall development of a child, because skills like soft skills, or maybe the basic skills of, how to navigate life, how to manage stress, these are basically the things that are going to remain as they grow. So I think parents need to just focus on keeping it simple, showing the child how to solve problems by being a problem solver themselves. And yeah, and as they see that their parents are doing it, I think students will follow. So it's going to be a pattern.
Rightly put. I think going back to the basics which form their foundation, and like I think Prashant and Dr. Jaru were talking about, degree only takes you to one aspect, not from their time where you could take the degree and continue 35 years in that field, but now things are rapidly changing. So having that mindset shift, I think, is very critical. So thank you for sharing that. My next question is actually to Prashant. You've been in multiple edtech startups and of your own as well. How has technology changed? And I know you have been with teachers trying to solve the most crucial problems that they are facing, and tech has played a role. So, how has technology changed the way teachers are teaching? And how has it also changed the way students are consuming or students are learning? And you've seen a shift, I'm sure, from TFI to now, right, Prashant? So, what are your thoughts on tech playing that role and how has it shifted?
Yeah, big question. I think it's the big difference, like, okay, just generally to keep it simple, I would say is two, three big trends have changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years, I would say. One is sort of to bucket it as social media. That didn't exist. It did in its format. It did not exist where you could have access to anybody else's world around the world, and that's had a lot of ramifications on how students learn and what is aspirational and what they're looking forward to, and that I think is partly a big source of parental anxiety, is like, I don't know what my kid is looking at, adult content or bad things. Like, that's not even it. It's more like, I don't know what weird corner of the internet they're in. Like, they want to be a YouTuber. Like, today you go to any school and ask a kid, they all want to be YouTubers, they want to be influencers, they want to have their own podcast, right? So there is that one space of like teachers having to be okay with this new paradigm where they are not like the only source of information or truth or anything in the world. Like, they are just a part of that 7 8 hours in the day, and I think there is considerable discomfort in that. Even the teachers don't know how to deal with this, and in a lot of schools there's, students have instas Finstas, there's entirely fake Instagram profiles. They have multiple identities online. They are engaging with each other in communities that the teacher is unaware of. And, there's so many layers, there's social complexities and layers that we don't know. And so I think like great teachers have somehow figured out that how to get in there, right? How to be part of those memes, how to be part of that world. And I think today a great teacher, unfortunately or fortunately, has become someone who can get with some of those trends and all of that. And it's always been the same going back also, right? The second big trend, of course, is that till 2012, like a lot of artificial intelligence was discriminative. So I show many pictures of a glass and it could figure out if it's a glass or not. Today, you can actually ask it to generate a glass and talk to you about it and describe it. And that's sort of the generative like world we're living in, right? And so that's new. Again, that is in fact like the biggest stressor of the system is every exam question is figure outable. And in fact, like deep research questions and things like that, like many like people who teach PhDs, for example, are freaking out because like I can do a PhD thesis overnight in like, and some difficult conversations are there around it, right? So I think these are two sort of big trends. And the third one is we don't know the influence of being exposed to a digital world. And the first digital natives are probably on this call and are part of the program that uMaster is addressing. Is we don't know how the mind is responding to that. There is some inflated conversations around, so like mental health, anxiety, suicide, depression, all of those conversations also coming out. So I think these three trends really occupy a large chunk of the teacher's mind: social media, impact of AI, and as well as like, mental health, anxiety, and what to do and how do you engage with an audience, right? So like I wouldn't say like who's doing what. There's a whole spectrum of users in that. I would say great teachers have understood how these three work in tandem, and bad teachers have decided to not worry about all of this and do what was happening 15 years ago, right? So I think that's how I would sort of qualify them.
Yeah, I think some of them are being very rigid about the shift that's happened and would want to continue. And that's where I think students are having that, they're just in class and things are just flying above because their mind is running all over. And it's also accentuated now with social media, with AI at play. And there's a lot more other things that's coming into this picture. And to actually create career opportunities for this audience that's actually coming up is a very tricky space. And to actually look at that, Dr. Jero, I want you to kind of throw some light on this. Is what are some of the emerging sectors and career opportunities in STEM that students should be aware of, and that is actually catering to the current needs of the students, right? Because it's very easy for them to just shift if they're not interested in things. So how is the current workforce actually creating these opportunities? What do you think is out there for the students?
So that's a very good question, a very important one. Most often, the speed at which things change was very, very slow. It took at least 15 to 25 years, but now it's 2 to 3 years. So whatever we create, we can only predict. So right now, World Economic Forum, United Nations, and all of them have come up with a career. What would be the top career choices for people? And in that, what they say, STEM is going to increase by threefold more than any other career. So that is one thing which is definitely going to happen. And they've given 18 areas of expertise which people may be involved in, which will have the highest economic potential. And in that 18, 15 are largely STEM based. Even the other three require STEM, but it's not directly classified as STEM. So the top ones would definitely be AI/ML, then anything related to e-commerce, then robotics, and then comes health and life sciences, because right now still that is not going to be in the top, but by 2045 to 50 is when it's going to reach there, because this is relatively a new field when compared to most other things. We understand very little about our body. I would say just 5%, but we know more about what's there in the distant parts of the universe. So this is definitely a huge need. AI, ML, or any kind of tech, the biggest use, because I've been in this domain, biggest use will be in biomedicine healthcare, because at some given point in time when our health and things kind of change, the prediction like which Nori kind of said, we don't know what is going to happen at this point in time. We can only predict, but predictions seldom work. And even if we are going to predict at that, we don't know what is going to happen because the rate of shift is very fast. So that is the aspect which we'll have to definitely think of, is be very fluid and focus on the areas of STEM, because that's the whole point here of there is going to be STEM in almost every field. Even people who do commerce or other aspects will be working in STEM-based companies or something like that. So because every aspect of it will move towards that.
Thank you, Dr. Jeru. I think you brought out AI and ML to be the top. Obviously, we all know it, and I'm glad you brought that up because my next question is moving to Prashant, who I have personally known to be the most adaptable of us lot. So, Prashant, the question is with deep tech, primarily with rapid advancements in AI and ML, how are you using it in your everyday living? And what are some of the deep tech areas that you think will emerge in the next 5 to 10 years that students should know about it? Actually, because it's like information's out there, then they can actually go through it. They don't have to have a degree around it. But if they can focus, read about it, which will also help them be prepared in the next 10 years, right? So I hope you got the question. How are you using it in your everyday life? And what do you think are some of the 3 to 5 areas that you think is emerging at this point?
Right. Great question. I think sort of generally I love experimenting, so you've probably seen a lot of posts around playing with different like generative tools, like Pika does a lot of 3D generative stuff you can create. Midjourney has become the rage for creating a lot of images and art, and so I think like that for me is a personal area of like experimenting and stuff. But for many people on this call, like you use a lot of AI and ML, you just don't know it. Every Instagram post that pops up at the top of your feed, there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you're most likely to spend a lot of time on, what you're least likely to spend a lot of time on. Unfortunately, a lot of it is just like what is going to get you to buy a product. Really, that's where the thing is, right? A lot of people think there's some evil, genius work happening behind the scenes, trying to get you to click on an ad in some format and get you to purchase and check out. Like that's really the whole journey, and so we are experiencing the effects of it in that usage. And second layer is you would have face unlock is something that is a very core AI feature, discriminative on a daily basis and things like that. So we're already inundated, we're surrounded by it, and all of that, right? So but I think what's been more fun is and more exciting is I don't have to worry about, for example, sounding formal or informal in a mail. Like I can always run it past ChatGPT and get me to sound the way I want me to sound. That's a huge leap. Like I've it has crept into my life, and that bit of cognitive mind space is gone now. I'm like I have something to spar with in some sense. And I think the second layer is picking up a new topic, picking up a new skill has become a lot more accessible. Like you can just say explain like I'm five, and you'll get a lot more intuition and understanding over it. And with some like the whole conversation on DeepSeek and the newer models that are coming out, it also does so many levels of reasoning before it gives you content to munch on, that you can go super deep and get a lot of sources and a lot of information and pick up things very, very quickly. So I think some of those are my personal use cases. But I think for students who are thinking about what next 3 to 5 years, like definitely like what both Palak and Jeru are working on, like personalized medicine, I think, is a big area. That how do we build really great experiences for people when they go to a doctor, make them, be more healthy, live longer. Those are big questions around some of that personalized medicine thing. And two is, I think, food security will be like a big area of we are at the cusp of a lot of food security issues, especially in India. So I think that agri biotech and those are kind of the fields that are most open to AI sort of playing a big role in helping increase yields, increase productivity, those kind of conversations. And three, I think definitely around cybersecurity is a big area for people, because we know we've already all known somebody around us who's been scammed. It's not even like a faraway thing. Like, it's not even folklore that we hear about it. It's a cousin, it's a family member, someone who's been scammed, who's been phished. So these are, I think, very real, up close and personal things that even as students you are exposed to and you feel passionate about. So you'd want to pick up those areas and try and solve them. And I only encourage parents to allow them to do and go down those rabbit holes and find what exactly inside of that is exciting.
And I think these three were not in the horizon in the last 10 years, and it's coming up. And with so much information access, it's easier for students to start off, go down that rabbit hole. So students, please make a note of this. This will be super helpful for you all. Now that you've mentioned these three areas, I'm sure there are a lot of problems that students are currently facing when they're pursuing STEM, and the challenges that are going to be there. And I want Dr. Palak to actually throw some light on what do you think is the problem that you are observing that the students are currently facing when they're pursuing STEM, and what do you think will be the challenges that will come up for them as well? Because as with so much AI and ML coming up at play, what do you think will be the challenges as well in the field of STEM, if you could highlight some points that you have?
Right. So, the problems that the student is going to face is a big impact on the mindset shift, because anything in STEM would involve, direction from teachers or direction from seniors. But I feel because of the lack of it currently, right now, I feel there will be a little stopgap situation where we don't know what to exactly do. So right now, I feel that there will be a need for more people to come online and speak about it. But yes, a student is going to really that mindset shift to actually think laterally, to actually have a collaboration. For example, now if like Dr. Jeru mentioned, that there is going to be a lot of industry academia collaboration. In fact, a lot of universities have come up with this entire thing that they want to do a lot of things which are with the industry, right? But in that entire situation, a student is the one who's going to face it, and he's not going to be very direct. He's going to be directionless because, technically there is nobody who has actually done it before. So I feel this is going to impact in terms of, for a few years at least, in terms of how, you know, a student is going to go through the process of their education. But yes, eventually it's something that's very much solvable.
Thank you, Dr. Palak. I think when you mentioned that they are clueless and they need guidance, I think that's where I feel I've seen Dr. Jeru mentor a lot of students across the globe. So, Dr. Jeru, in that space, what is your point of view on STEM in India and in the globe? Because you've worked with across students from the globe. Could you share some insights on what are the similarities that you've seen? What are the differences, and what opportunities are there for this cross collaboration as well? Some thoughts when you have spoken to students and you've mentored them.
That's a very tricky question, actually, because like the ecosystems are very different across, and definitely there's a lot of potential for cross collaborations that exist, but the awareness of how to go about establishing that is what is missing. Like you spoke about the problems, right? Right now, there's a lot of access to information, and say people do a medical degree or engineering or scientific any science-based degree, The assumption for students most often is they land in a role which was directly linked to what their curriculum taught them, but that's not there. So that's the biggest problem in terms of like Dr. Palak kind of addressed it, is where do you go? Because it's all interdisciplinary. You'll have to understand which skill sets of yours would kind of become more relevant, right? Like that's where your soft skills kind of come into the picture. Of your technical knowledge is one aspect, but your technical knowledge combined with your soft skills is what is kind of very much important. So you asked about the difference. I feel that is what is kind of a missing factor here, which Dr. Palak said about the communication, right? For us, we have, in terms of knowledge and awareness about the global scenario, we have it in a very theoretical sense, and we have a lot of awareness, but that ecosystem and that interlinking ability is what is kind of missing here, which is mainly due to the numerical number is quite high here, and its personalization is kind of very challenging. Like even if the professors or somebody, right, like they are faced with 60 to 100 students, whereas there is 20 or 25 students, and the model is more practical there too. Like the classes are just 2 or 3 hours a week, but here you have classes all throughout, and so you have to make time to understand what will you do with that knowledge, right? So that is where, in terms of navigating, I see a 5 to 6 year gap as a problem. For the global and Indian point of view, intercollaboration is very much on now, with a lot of fellowships being available. A lot of industrial programs also are available for students to go. So only thing is like, how do you get awareness about it? So that is what needs to increase. So if that kind of increases, and if they're kind of given mentorship from academic, industrial, or entrepreneurial experts, like I think it's Dr. Palak spoke about it earlier as well, right? Like where mentoring and teaching is kind of very important. And if that is kind of addressed, I think the gap between global and Indian can be reduced.
Thank you, Dr. Jeru. With your thought, I also see that there are global challenges, and it's quite similar across the global challenges primarily. And now with so much cross collaboration and attempts to do that, and this question is to all three of you. As the world is facing complex issues, and we can name them, we start off with climate change, which is across as unemployment, healthcare crisis, and resource scarcity as well. How do you think STEM education in particular can evolve to address these global challenges? Just 2-3 pointers on what do you think? And Prashant, please do highlight on this team as well. So we can start off with you itself, Prashant, if you want to start.
Awesome. I think the general like lingo you've probably been exposed a fair bit at Center for Exponential Change is these are wicked problems, right? There are difficult problems and there are really wicked problems, and wicked problems are defined normally as those that are I think there's a good explanation. I mean, some characteristics, right? Which is there's no clear definition of the problem or its solutions. There's no inherent logic that signals when it's a solved problem. There are infinite number of solutions and no solution is true or false. And every solution you pick is actually irreversible. So every trial counts a lot. And these problems are very interconnected, and each of them is so unique that one approach can't solve it. So that sort of signifies what's a very wicked problem. Unemployment, very wicked problem, things like, sustainability, climate change, and things like this to pick out. So I think that a lot of the goal of STEAM education in general should move away from saying that typical question you see in a paper, right? Like, Jeru lost 3 apples, he had a bag of 10 apples. The problem was given to you, you figured out the solution, and life was all hunky-dory, right? But I think the real question is, that nobody's asking is why was Jeru carrying 10 apples in the first place? And can we ask sort of more critical, deeper questions around that, and try and pull out what the actual problem is. So I think a lot of STEAM education in general has to move away from like, very simple, here's a grid and the things that fit inside the grid, to saying that it's more fluid, there's a lot more complexity involved in it, and actually being okay with complexity, being okay with discomfort, and sitting with the problem, being close to the problem for a long time. So I think that those are some of the harder things that STEM education has to pick up. And sort of also want to add on to a previous point on STEM in India versus the globe is just, I feel all of these are at the end of the day linked to spending. So if you ask me what's the gap between India's education or R&D and the world, it's 2%. We spend 0.6, 0.7% of our GDP on R&D. The rest of the world spends 2.6, 2.7% if you're competing with large nations, right? So I think that that's always a good thing to account, to push, even if you're a student. Like, that's a great challenge to pick up and say, how do we just expand the amount of money being spent by the government on R&D, on STEM education, and those kind of things. Yeah.
Thank you, Prashant. I think you've already presented a problem that students can work towards solving and create some workforce and career opportunity around that. Moving on, Dr. Jeru, what are your thoughts on this?
So there is a huge opportunity, yes, in terms of doing R&D and solving the issues, which Prashant kind of spoke about. I would like to add on some of the major problems of the global problems are because there is lack of representation from people in STEM in policy making and governmental decisions. Most of it is taken by people in the economic stream and in the political stream or in the law stream. So once there's more involvement of the STEM stream, like I think the Prime Minister Modi to address this in the podcast with Ahmed, that like there's need for a lot of PhDs and expertise in STEM to kind of go into that, so that the decision once made in terms of solving the issues are done by experts or a group of experts in that domain. Right now, there is a gap there, right? The decision making and the people who execute the problems are, there's a huge gap. So I feel that is one big opportunity which needs to be definitely addressed. And this is kind of even a global issue. Like I find that even in North America, like US and Canada too, the discussions of this, because like we spoke about the fellowship, right? There are fellowships where PhDs or postdocs are kind of trained on policy making and going into government sector. I think that is one important addition which needs to be done here. In addition to the R&D budget and the people working in STEM and all of that, that would actually be a critical move for the Viksit Bharat 2047. Because every development is going to be STEM related, whatever said or done. Every development needs some amount of STEM development. So awareness about that will come better when this gap is addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Jeru. And Dr. Palak?
Yeah, I think I would like to add to what Dr. Jeru has said. It's a very valid point where, so if you look at people coming out of STEM education today, are very restrictive in the sense that a lot of financial literacy is not there. As he mentioned about policy making, these are not things that people are even thinking about, far from execution, right? So I feel that people who are studying and are really educated, like let's take an example of something as simple as a hospital. We are running a hospital of doctors, but there are random MBAs who are actually the core of the business, right? And they're only looking at it as a business. So I feel till the people who are in the workforce from STEM education, they think laterally, they think beyond what their job description is supposed to say. It's going to be very difficult to move and actually apply what you mentioned. So upskilling people after STEM, because now there is much more time and knowledge is like really available and accessible, will actually step by step ensure that they are part of the decision making, because now they understand, and that will actually create like a change overall.
Thank you, you three. I think what my takeaways are from what Prashant said primarily is sitting with that feeling of complexity. It's okay to sit with problem. And I think that's also what moves people from not really participating in, let's say, policy making and decision making. And you're saying, that's not my problem to solve. I'm working on this, but it's not my problem. And that lateral thinking, the infusion of it, getting multidisciplinary learning, and you don't really have to get a degree. You can just go read up about it because knowledge is available everywhere. which can be a starting point for all the students who are currently listening to this, saying that be a part of it, go out there and get your hands dirty. And that's the only way you can solve for your own space that you're working in, irrespective of, and especially in the STEM space. Like you rightly put, in hospitals, doctors play a huge role, but it's also run by MBAs. And how do you marry the two? How do you work with the two for solving the challenges that the patients are coming with, right? So thank you, you three. It's been really insightful for me to just listen, and so rich. I'll now give space for the students if they have some questions. Hi, I've been a big fan of the work that uMaster does. How important is it to keep up with this era of automation and artificial intelligence? I am from the data science domain, but I feel like there's always a gap between what I know and what's new. We've already spoken about it, but if you want to give a quick tip to Anjali, three experts, shoot it and right away. Anybody can address this question.
I think I can go first. There's a lot of automation and artificial intelligence. Yes, the data science domain, the gap definitely exists because, like I said in one of my own points, the rate of growth is way too fast. It's absolutely impossible now to kind of keep knowing what's happening new every day. But the data science domain is very universal. So it can fit into any kind of a STEM domain, and that's the huge requirement because any kind of work people do, scientists, doctors, or everybody's decision is eventually based on data. So data is a very critical component, and its biggest use is going to be in life science and healthcare for sure. At least from my point of view, I can say that's where it's going to be.
I think they say that data is the new oil, right? Because uh, today it's like we were able to create something like this based on these large data models. So I think the question about how important it is, I think it's a non-negotiable. It's the way we live and breathe now. So that's the way to go in any field. It doesn't matter what you're doing.
Yeah, I have a question. I'll just quickly introduce my background. So, I've done my Masters of Science in Biomedical Genetics. So, I just wanted to ask a quick question since Dr. Jeru spoke about so many opportunities opening up in science, but we do still see a large proportion of people being unemployed even after they finish their masters. So, how exactly should they navigate their degree in order to have more opportunities in the future? Like not just in academia, but industry as well.
Oh, that's a loaded one. Dr. Palak, do you want to start off and then we'll ask the others?
Yes, so I've seen this problem very recurrent, a problem of unemployment. But I would say it's all about two things. One is upskilling because your degree is just it's just a degree. Like you should just leave it aside and think about how you're actually helping that organization to grow or in solving that problem, right? So an organization is built on some problem statement, and if you can use your skills and not your degree to actually solve that problem, then you are not going to be in a situation of unemployment. But that will only come, as we discussed, that we need to be fluid, right? So it's not going to happen if you are stuck to just one thing, that okay, I know only this much, right? I'm not even going to look left and right. Then you will never be able to then you are going to constantly jump from job to job wherever your skill can be applicable. But if you are fluid, I think you have solved your own problem of unemployment, because now the organization needs you because you are adding some value to them. So I think it's as simple as that.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I also had one more question for you. So, since you spoke about soft skills, so if somebody is actually beginning their degree, let's say in MBBS or any other STEM field, how exactly should they go about it since the beginning itself so that it can be more skill oriented for them? Because as students in STEM particularly, we see a lot of like very less opportunities right now traditionally.
Okay, I think it's very simple. It starts from uh, the first layer of your day, right? How you deal with your parents, how you deal with your friends, how you are in today's generation, what kind of content you're consuming on Instagram will also define how your mind is playing around with your own self. So I feel it's not something that you can say that, okay, today, from today, I'm going to start learning how to do, you know, better at this. But it's all about like constant application, right? So if it's as simple as, okay, if there is a fight, how do you actually come to a solution for it? Or if you are participating in a cultural function, how do you ensure that a set of people come together for the same purpose and are able to execute it? So it's not exactly related to what you're learning in your degree or what you're learning in the classroom. 99% of your personality is what you're doing outside the classroom. So make sure that you are present there, make sure you're actively thinking about developing it outside the classroom, and then it's all good.
Right. Thank
I
you.
have I have a point for that, which I found very different between India and North America. Is when you go in as a fresh student, you not only go in to gain education, but you go in to build your community. So look for like-minded people. If you're going to universities, you definitely have a student group who are doing different skill sets, right? Having different backgrounds. So try to not stick to your own classrooms and approach only people with a particular skill set. Try to build a team with which whom you can work for the rest of your life. You actually get the best team. Even in entrepreneurship, what they look for is team fit, and the best team is like for the people whom you know for a long time. And they are most often your friends whom you meet in your bachelor's or your master's. I think that is one big thing which has to kind of come across here. It's no longer going to be an independent. Like I know like there's a lot of competition between students. Like you want to be better than the other and that, but that's not going to work once you graduate, because it's everything is interdependent. Even if you are the best in the world in something, you have to have at least another 4 to 5 people who are going to work along with you to build something. So that you can start off in the beginning phase, which will actually help you in the long run much later.
Got it. Thank you so much. Thank you for the discussion as well.
Thank you. Prashant, do you have anything to add on?
I just feel like, meet as many people as you can and build as many things as you can, and some goodness will come out on the other side. So adding to both of what Palak and Jaru were saying, I think that if any given day you feel like, I'm confused, I'm lost, I just always say, like, pick a friend and pick a project and just start working on it. At the end of it, you'll either, you'll at least have a friend that comes out of it, or you may also have a great project that comes out of it. So something fun you'll pick up along the way.
I'll add just one last, as
Please.
he mentioned, doing a lot more than what is given to you, and failing really fast. Like, you don't have time in today's world where you can take 2 years and then build something and then fail, right? Because it's so fast. So I think accepting that failing fast is the way to go. And that's where eventually, after 99 failures, you might see like one ray of success. So accept that and you'll be good to go.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Amazing words of wisdom coming from the three of you, and I'm sure it's quirking their interest and they're taking notes. We have Maria Nikita's hand up, so I think she has a question.
Yeah. So hi to all of you, and it's been lovely listening to all the insights you shared on STEM. So I'm a software developer currently working in an MNC. And with this whole, AI, like how Prashant spoke about AI and automation and all of that coming up, how can we stay relevant in the future? How can we future-proof our careers in the software industry? I did see that Prashant is an engineer himself. So what do you have to say for us fellow engineers? How can we stay relevant in the times coming up?
Uh, I think going back to my previous answer, just like I would say, always approach it from the lens of, imagine you were an artist and you came across a new set of brushes, a new set of watercolors, a new tool to play with. So I feel like every time there's an advancement and there's a new set of tools at your disposal, like approach it from the lens of, what more can I do now, given that I have these additional tools with me. And I feel like that has served me, at least over the years, just trying to think about it from that lens. And some of the most like fun, creative people I know around me, I've always approached, any advancement, anything new, as like, oh, here's a new tool in my hand, and what can I build with it? What can I create with it? So I don't know if that answers your question, but I feel even if you're a software engineer and you're lost, like, think about all the fun new GitHub copilots and Sonnet and Claude and all of these things outside, and all the new things you could build with it that would yeah, it's just more arrows in your arsenal.
I hope that answered your question, Nikita.
Yes, it's actually very insightful. And another thing I just wanted to ask is, with STEM coming up, what are the career opportunities that we can have? Like, what are some emerging careers which we see ahead, which are coming up, which may not be that prevalent now? Our parents have this thing where, if you, let's say, I want to become something, they're like, no, that might not have that much scope. So what are some things that could come up in the future?
I want to only touch very briefly on it, and then maybe hand over to Palak or Jeru. They would be more in sync with the career end of things. But there's a beautiful World Economic Forum Jobs of the Future report that came out like just a month back or something, and I was surprised to see that the most growth in jobs has been in agriculture and healthcare workers, and like a lot of what we would call blue collared and looked down upon, like those are actually where the majority of jobs are today, right? So I feel like anything to do with services around you that require people, and being in sync with those industries and understanding how to build solutions there, build tools there, like those are actually where a lot of things are happening, and a lot of cognitive tasks have funnily ended up being covered by a lot of generative AI tools. So people like me are actually, our careers are in question today, and so those are just some thoughts on top of my mind, but maybe I'll tag Palak to take over.
Sure. So I feel that careers which are too diverse but coming together, for example, an engineer does not have any skill for medicine, right? But AI in medicine, which are two like opposite fields coming together to solve a problem. These are skills, I mean, these are career options that will actually sort of start booming because these are sort of difficult pathways because of the mindset. Because if you're an engineer, you're going to always think that how am I to solve a problem in healthcare? But technically, both of these have to come together. They have to integrate if you really want to solve a problem. So, I don't know if you know, but a lot of institutions are now encouraging students to collaborate because there was a hackathon earlier that you might have faced in an engineering college. It was all about how you're solving a problem as an engineer. So you're not even looking at healthcare because you're not even going to approach a doctor to help you out with that. But today that scenario is changing because at the end of the day, we have to solve the problem where there is a problem. And diverse fields coming together is where the new booms are going to happen.
I just want to add on a point. I think cultural understanding of everything is a very important skill set. Whatever domain you're going to work on, every domain will kind of become like independent communities, sustainable, small, tiny communities, and each community will have their own cultural understandings or cultural way of approaching. So anything you kind of do, you kind of to understand the architecture and the culture of any particular field you're choosing to work on. As a software engineer, I think you have a very diverse, like data, right? Data science too. You have a very diverse domains which you can contribute to. But you'll have to understand. In simple terms, it's like every people who are trained in different fields speak very differently. they have a pattern of speaking. So getting that basic understanding helps with how you perceive and how you contribute to that particular domain. So that is another additional skill which I think would be very essential in every field of STEM, because it's going to be interdisciplinary, and I feel people who learn that will have the higher ability to navigate and move forward in their careers.
Thank you. We have Purvi Shah whose hands up. I'm also told that there are some parents who are in this conversation. So if you all have a question as well, please do raise your hand and we'll come up to you next. Purvi, you can ask your question.
Hi, I love the talk. I have a question. So I think it was Dr. Jeru who had mentioned that students, when they enter the workforce after graduating, they realize that it's very different from what they have learned in college or in university. So, how can we help students get a reality check on on the jobs that they want? So right now, I've just started my career as a genetic counselor, and I can see a huge difference in what I had learned as a the role of a genetic counselor and what I am doing right now. So I feel like if students in the beginning of their bachelor's or maybe in their junior college as well, if they have some exposure about the reality of a lot of these professions, they can make better choices for themselves. So, how can we go about that?
I'd like to take it up. So I feel like the reason that you see people abroad way more better at their jobs after their education is mainly because they have had internship opportunities and they have gone outside in the world in some format, right? Like today in India, we look at a McDonald's job as something that's uh, redundant, right? Like who's going to do that? But it's teaching you a lot of things. It's teaching you how a consumer behaves. It's teaching you how marketing works. It's teaching you how sales work, something that probably in STEM education is not even touched upon. But going out there and seeing that practical world is what is going to make a lot of difference when you actually step out, when you are ready after your degree. So I think that mindset shift, that you can do internships, you can, no job is just a job, I think these are mindset shifts that needs to happen, at least again in India, so that we are able to adapt to what's coming for us.
Right. And also, I agree that internship is a way for students to get that exposure. But I feel like in a lot of internships that are being offered to students, they are still not given a proper responsibility, which I get because they're just interns, they're starting out, they're new. But I feel like if they really do get some responsibility even as interns, they can see themselves at least working in future in that similar profession. And I think that's what helps with uMaster, because uMaster is actually making students go about being independent in projects, helping them think on their own, working with data. So I think that could really help. And if there are more industries or more internships like that, then yes, I think it could fill that gap.
I think the employer's mindset also has to shift, right? Like if you don't give your
Yeah.
employer intern that opportunity to explore, how is he ever going to get there? So a lot of mindset shift is what is needed.
Thank you, Dr. Palak. Prashant, did you have anything to add on? Because I see you unmuted. Okay, superb.
No, no.
On the closing note, I know you have shared a lot about yourself, your work, but I would like the three of you to share a bit about how you and your organization currently is contributing to the future of STEM. You're also the employer, and you're also working with students. So how are you and your organization contributing to the future of STEM? And I would like to start with Prashant.
Awesome. So we are, very kind of deeply plugged into teacher tools, like that's sort of the core. And what at Quiz is the, our broad goal is how do we empower every teacher to motivate every learner. So that's sort of our big statement, right? And we work with like millions of teachers around the world. And I think what we're trying to do today is make it extremely easy to make learning fun in the classroom and not take a stance on like this is the right thing to be taught. Get too much into creating content ourselves. We build great tools. So we have, for example, a tool that people love, which is interactive video, right? That you can just pick any like really fun YouTube video. You can pick like with race, add in a bunch of questions, and each question some really fun ways of engaging with that content, drag and drop, or multiple choice questions or open-ended responses and things like that. And in fact, with some AI tools today, you're able to just pull the video and it'll generate a bunch of really exciting questions and put scenarios in for you, right? So we want to make it really easy for teachers to build engaging lessons, and we're hoping like that's sort of where the impact lies, is that it becomes more exciting for you to be in a science lesson. It becomes more exciting for you to be in a maths lesson, and then you'd hopefully associate positively with some of those subjects and want to pursue them further, want to do applied math, want to do applied science, those kind of things, right? So that's sort of where in the realm of things we are. And I want to kind of close out on there's a Seymour Papert book called Mindstorms, in which he says that if we grew up in math land, we would all speak fluent math because everybody around you is speaking it fluently, right? So I think that's sort of the hope of what we want to do: build like really fun experiences, so you're immersed inside of those subjects and you build a love for STEM in some sense, and of course all subjects, but I think a lot of STEM use cases are prominent. Yeah.
Thank you, Prashant. Sounds really exciting. I would love to see and explore the tools that you've been sharing with the teachers. I did see a few, but thank you for sharing. Dr. Palak, up to you next.
Prashant, in fact, I was so curious about what you're doing that I actually went and like had the experience, and it was just amazing. I'd like to add here, I'm doing something similar in the medical education space, one that's post your 18 years of age, once you are into that race of becoming a doctor, which is something that's a very untapped space for, because it's usually an ignored space where you believe that the person who's there has made it because of their intelligence, but we have forgotten that there are so many other things that are going on the mind of that student. So we're doing the same thing in the space of education for and dental students, and trying to make it much more engaging, fun, relatable. And because their attention span has decreased so massively, addressing the fact that it has happened, you can't reverse it. So you have to make sure you align with what the current generation needs. So yeah.
Wow, it's making medicine and medical sound a little less scary for an art student. It was too scary when we were trying to get in. I feel like this is making it sound a little less scary and approachable. So thank you, Dr. Palak. Um, I dearly hope that you take on and make it as easy and consumable for students and less stress. And like you stressed on the mindset shifts, I think just giving space for the mind to have more of these shifts to happen than actually worry about exams. I think, thank you. Finally, I think I'll come to you, Dr. Jeru.
Thank you, both of them. I think I like both their ventures. I did see about how easy it is to access and what developments they have done to apply in their particular domains. uMaster started with a vision to incorporate R&D or like gain mastery over something. So in STEM, the huge requirement that's going to be there is having multi-dimensional ability. So in a nutshell, I'll just put like uMaster has three-dimensional training. The first phase is where you learn to research like a scientist. It is like where you gain the independence of how to work in a project. Every field, every workforce requires to work in a project, but they are not taught that at all. So that is the first focus. The second focus is learn to build on what you have learned, like how you learn to research. So you build on it like an innovator. Think of how you will apply what you learn and build on something which will benefit either a small group or a larger group. It's up to the project and what you do. And finally, how do you grow like an entrepreneur? The third phase, because currently the percentage of people who do masters globally is around 15%, but the alarming statistics is higher your graduation, lower the chances of you getting employed in the first year. So most often, the best way is to apply your education in a very practical sense and build on something, then you're at least giving employment to somebody. So how do you go about doing that? So everything has a process. So, but the process is practical, it's not theoretical. So that's the whole vision of that. So nobody gains mastery over something by reading, it's only by doing. So that's the motto of what uMaster is. So that's what the organization is for.
Thank you, Jeru. I think you just actually stitched in what Dr. Palak and Prashant were talking earlier on as well, right? First, actually understand, dig deep, do R&D, and then actually pick somebody and try and solve for it, right? Bring somebody, pick up a project, work on it, and actually create workforce. Maybe you create your own space where you become the employer, and that's how one can tackle the future workforce and so much that the students are currently going through. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of our conversation, but it was so insightful. And if I were a student at that point, I think at now, it seems a little less scary. It seems doable. It seems like I can go and take, like, you have the possibility, like Prashant said, and like I think uMaster, you can go and just go tackle it. So thank you so much, the three of you.